Jai Hind friends, I hope you are doing great and looking forward to these videos. So we shall take 10 more questions in this video and learn more about the system of governance in India. As always, if you can keep the copy of the Constitution of India for handy for reference, it will be good. And for best learning, I recommend you pause the video after every question is displayed on the screen, and then pause, mark your own answer, and only then proceed to listen. You can also get these questions at one place as a quiz and also as PDF on the Telegram. The link is in the description. You may like to follow the channel for even more questions to be posted after these, the recent ones are completed. As always, on the side there will be some learning points for you. Today I have selected the theme of theatre in India especially. So I hope you'll enjoy that. So let's proceed, and the first question we have today here is this: which of the following items are included in the Union list of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India? I'm sure you know the Union list of 7th schedule. These are the subjects where only the Union has jurisdiction, legislative as well as executive. So if you see these things, acquisition of property, you can realize because of the whole drama around the Land Acquisition Act, and if you read the news etc. at that time properly, it is actually in the concurrent list. It is not in the Union list. Forests, originally it was in the state list, but in one of the previous questions also we have talked about it, that the 42nd Amendment Act of the Constitution, it had shifted it along with other subjects like education and protection of wildlife and the birds, weights and measurements. All these things came to the concurrent list. So yes, this is also not in the Union list, which the question demands. Then public debt of state. Now this state is the states, right? The states of India. So public debt of state is actually in the state list only. So don't get confused with the nation state here. That's not the language we will use here in the subjects. So actually you'll see none of these are actually in the Union list. So let's move on to the next question. And the next question is, what do you understand by the term delegated legislation? Not really that difficult question, but let's see the options. Exercise of power to make legislation directed by the judiciary to the legislature. Well, there is no such direction that the judiciary can anyway give. They may always, have a non-binding kind of suggestion or, any such thing, but it cannot be direction. Legislature doesn't make law on the direction of judiciary, right? There is a concept of separation of power there. Anyway, so that's kind of, not just wrong. For this question, it is, irrelevant kind of an option. Exercise of power to legislate under the authority delegated by the Constitution to the legislature. Now, that's not delegation. It is their responsibility. Understand, the word delegated means somebody's power, it is being given to someone else, right? So, Constitution is not giving its power to the legislature. Constitution is authorizing legislature that you are the authority for law. So delegated legislation actually would mean if the legislature further delegates it to someone, and that is exactly where your option D comes. Because through the law, the power to make rules is delegated to the executive, right? So under the authority of the Constitution, as we saw here in option B, legislature is authorized to make law, but legislature may further delegate it for making rules by the executive, right? And that is essentially what explains the idea of delegated legislation. So anyway, don't get confused here, and a good number of you did get it right. So not a very difficult question, I understand, but these terms etc. we should be very clear. So let's go to the next question, and that is, according to the Constitution of India, President shall cause to be laid before the Parliament. Some of these reports are mentioned here. And I hope you've realized by now that, Finance Commission or the Comptroller and Auditor General or the NCST or, the work that is done by the UPSC, these being constitutional bodies, even your random guess should be that all of these will actually be caused to be laid by the President of India only, right? It would be his responsibility there. And that's the case as well. All of these reports are actually caused to be laid by the President of India in the Parliament. So, and very nice, 70% of you actually got it right. So that's very good. Some of the statutory bodies you may sometimes be confused as to who is supposed to is it to be laid in the Parliament also or not, or is it just submitted to the concerned ministry or department, etc. So I would recommend that you can make a list of those 8-10 such bodies and just make a tabular form. Because these are questions which are very basic and sometimes it's even beyond understanding, but try and understand the principles that what is the purpose behind this, and is it kind of a check and balance, and is it somewhere the Parliament may be involved, things like that. I will try to make some document like that when the time permits, but I have noted it down and I'll put it up. Okay, so let's go to the next question, and that is: the provisions made under the second schedule of the Constitution of India do not contain explicit provisions regarding emoluments or salary of which of the following. Okay, so if you can recall, if you can't recall, look at the second schedule. You should know that the second schedule is divided into 5 parts, that is part A, B, C, D and E. Part B has been omitted, which was omitted by the 7th Amendment Act, but it used to be the salaries etc. of the ministers. Part A, of course, is the salary, emoluments etc. of the President and the Governor. Part C is the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Chairman, Deputy Chairman of the legislative bodies, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, State Assembly, State Legislative Council, all of them. Then you have the judges of the Supreme Court and High Court, and of course the last one is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. That's all you have, right? So if you see Vice President of India, well, if you read closely, you will see that there is a mention of Vice President of India, but that is just a mention, and that too when the Vice President is discharging the duties as President. The regular emolument which the Vice President of India gets as an ex officio Chairman of Rajya Sabha, there is no explicit mention there. So this actually is not mentioned, and the question is asking, do not contain for which of them? So yes, Vice President is one of them. Prime Minister, there is no explicit mention of Prime Minister. Prime Minister is also just a minister which anyway has now been removed from Part B, right? So even if it was just a minister, there was no special different provision there for Prime Minister etc. Everything is outside in the law made by Parliament. So Prime Minister's salary is actually also decided there. Then the Chief Election Commissioner, again, as you can see among the constitutional authorities of that nature, it's only the C and AG of India whose salary is specified there. Of course, they all enjoy the rank and the status of Judge of Supreme Court, so the salaries are known to us, but it is not an explicit mention there. So even this is not mentioned there. So all 3 of them, they are not mentioned, and well, the performance can be better here. Let's go to the next question. Which of the following statements are correct regarding the governor of a state in India? Okay, let's see. Governor must be at least 35 years of age. Yes, that is correct, because if you will see in Article 157 of the Constitution, there is only 2 qualifications as such. One is that the person should be a citizen of India, and second, the minimum age of 35 years. So yes, this is correct. Secondly, it says where the same person is appointed as governor of more states, the emolument and allowances of the governor shall be allocated among the states equally. Now, if you read this superficially, you will be like, yeah, that sounds correct. But it's the point is it's not equal. It's not necessarily equal. Article 158 of the Constitution. Please read these. These are very tiny 2-3 line provisions. 158 has many clauses. You can read clause 3A. It will simply say that, so this is where the conditions of governor's office are there. 157 is qualification, 158 is the conditions of office. So it says that in such case where there is appointment is for more than one state, the emoluments and allowances are to be allocated in a proportion that is to be decided by the President of India by an order. Okay, so that will be done by the President. Well, I mean, see, again, some basic things. It's just written provisions. That's what I always say, that something which is written, right, something which is a basic thing, how can we make a mistake like that? If it requires too much of thinking and analytical awareness and abilities, well, I can understand. But something which is written, a very basic thing, we should not be getting it wrong. Not in these numbers. that 76% of the people get it wrong. That's not a symbol of being on the right track. Anyway, so the second is actually wrong. So let's go to the next question, and that is, which of the following statutes are not within the jurisdiction of the National Green Tribunal? Some acts are given to us here. Now, if you remember, I'm sure you do, that NGT was created in 2010 by the NGT Act, okay, and also right to health, healthy environment. Right to healthy environment is considered as part of right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution, and through that kind of a background only, finally NGT was made in 2010. Now, there are many acts which are under the jurisdiction of NGT. It's very simple, you just try and you'll never get it wrong. So just remember, it will be related to water, air, you'll have forest, you'll also have, the environment and biology. Okay. So for water, there are two acts, one is Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, then Prevention and Control of Pollution Cess Act. Doesn't matter, just remember water. Then Forest Conservation Act, which is in the option also, Forest Conservation Act 1980. Then you have also this Biological Diversity Act. That's why I wrote here the last one, Biology Diversity Act of 2002. Then you also have, as I said, the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution, very much like Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, then Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, right? And also the Environment Protection Act of 1986, that is also there. Other than all of these, there is one more, Public Liability Insurance Act, right? Public Liability Insurance Act. Of course, you can understand why, the Act of 1991. I would very sincerely like to recommend that you see the NGT Act and just read the preamble of the Act. Okay, it's like just 3-4 paragraphs, hardly 1/4 of a page. So not much. Please read that. I'm sure you'll enjoy reading it. There's a lot of information. Plus, in fact, it was a question, I think in 2011 prelims, because it was just created, where actually it asks some basic questions about the Act. So read the preamble, please. Anyway, so the next question that we have for us, which of the following statements regarding Part 4A of the Constitution of India are correct? Okay. Part 4A, that is fundamental duties. I'm sure you know Article 51A of the Constitution. It begins itself by saying it shall be the duty of every citizen of India, right? It is applicable only to the citizens of India, not to foreigners, okay? Then it cannot be enforced by the courts through the writs. Absolutely correct. Many people get confused, but sir, some of the fundamental duties can be enforced by law. Yes, but then the fundamental duty is not getting enforced through a writ. The law is getting enforced through the writ, which is ultimately, in a way, implementation of the fundamental duties. Otherwise, fundamental duties are not enforceable through a writ unless you make a law on it. And then also the correct language one should use always is that the law is getting enforced, which is ultimately the enforcement of the duties that we have. Anyway, so the third statement says the state shall also observe the provisions. Now this is actually something which is the most important point of learning that I wanted to bring here, and that's why I put this statement here. I'll keep it quick. There was a case that is AIIMS Students Union versus AIIMS 2001. AIIMS Students Union versus AIIMS, where the Supreme Court very, very categorically has said that, listen carefully, state is all the citizens placed together. And hence, even though Article 51A does not expressly cast any fundamental duty on the state, the fact remains that the duty of every citizen of India is the collective duty of the state. Now, this is not just a fantabulous statement, this is actually what it is, that even the state is supposed to be observing these provisions. That's the spirit behind it. Anyway, so all three of them actually should be considered correct for us. And half of you did get it. So, I mean, I'll be okay, because as I always say, there's always one question I keep in every 20-30 questions, which is to make you learn and be aware of something. It's not really a test. So the goal being we should be revising and making progress. We should feel we know something more, we know something better than what we knew yesterday. All right, so I hope you recognized Mr. Girish Karnad. He passed away last year. So next question is, which of the following was or were the reasons for the federal with a strong center nature of the Constitution of India? Well, this is actually a repeat question by oversight, so I will not talk about it more. You can refer to the explanation of question number AK0014, which will be the second video in this series. So you please read that. This exact question somehow got repeated. So let's move on from this one and see again, even though I repeated it within a span of hardly 1 month, 70% get it right. Maybe the rest 30 did not see this question or attempt it earlier. Anyway, so the next question that we have is, which of the following offices are not an office of profit? This question, similar question on offices of profit, I have put up so many times. I even have put up now the explanation behind office of profit, not a complete lecture on office of profit, but just the explanation that how to go about these kind of questions, which is and which is not an office of profit. And still I somehow don't see why people 100% are not getting it right. Maybe you're not focusing. So please do that. See, simple rule of thumb, if there is an executive post, it is an office of profit, right? Yes, there may be some cases of exemption here and there, but otherwise, as a general rule of thumb, remember, so the moment you see President of India, Executive Office, yes, Office of Profit. Governor of a state, yes, Office of Profit. Prime Minister, yes, Executive Office of Profit. So I don't see what's the problem in very basic questions like these. These all are offices of profit, all of them, right? None of them is not an office of profit. Yes, for specific situations, some exemption may be given. For example, when there is an election of President of India, then all three of them are exempted. All three of them are exempted. They can contest the election. But for other purposes, they are not exempted. For example, Prime Minister of India is also exempted from the criteria of disqualification for a member of parliament. See, a member of parliament cannot hold office of profit. So, since they cannot hold office of profit, Prime Minister being an office of profit, they'll be disqualified. But being parliamentary system, this exemption is provided. But the exemption is not there for the other executive office. If you're a member of parliament, you cannot simultaneously be the President of India. Right? So you don't have to resign in advance, but you're not allowed to hold this office of profit. So different situations, different exemptions. But what is an office of profit or not, we should never be having any mistake, and this kind of a performance to me is not acceptable from an UPSC aspirant. These are most fundamental questions, right? So let's be better, please. Very soon I'm going to begin totally new questions once 400 questions are completed here, and a lot of this will be tested in a slightly higher level. I expect that you will be getting it right. Okay. So, the last question of today's video is, with reference to the Union Executive, which of the following may appoint an ad hoc committee, that's a mistake, an ad hoc committee of ministers, including a group of ministers, for taking decisions on some matters. Okay, now in the last video itself, if you remember, we have touched upon the idea of the transaction of business rules. And we did see in the video that it is the Prime Minister who decides the portfolio of the ministers and also the composition of the cabinet committees, the standing cabinet committees actually. And in the rules, again, it is mentioned that the ad hoc committees or even the group of ministers, they can be appointed by any of them, that is either the Prime Minister or the cabinet or even a standing committee itself. They all can decide to make ad hoc committees. Ad hoc committees are committees which are temporary, which are created for a specific purpose. When the purpose is over, the committee is dissolved. Right? So, it's from the transaction of business rules. These three and only these three can appoint ad hoc committees there or group of ministers. Okay, so that should not confuse you any further. Again, I hope we will do better as we move along. All right. So that's the last question of today's video, and as always I thought I'll leave you with some thoughts. in the spirit of the discussion so far in this video, the Navras. Navras means essentially the 9 aesthetic flavors of any visual or any literary piece or any kind of artistic work that evokes certain emotions in the audience, right? So when you see a dramatic piece, it creates a certain emotions in you. And the first such original thought was written that we have access to is in the Natya Shastra by Bharat Muni, and it had identified lesser ras, but finally today what we understand is the Navras, and I'm sure you'll be able to understand them easily: the Shringar, Hasya, Raudra, Karuna, Bibhats, Bhayanak, Veer, Adbhut, and the Shant. You can think more on this. I'll see you soon with 10 more questions. Till then, study well. Thank you very much.